A sharp echo rippled out of Moscow, and it wasn't about Ukraine. It was about the Caribbean. Russia's foreign ministry didn't mince words. If the United States pushes its military buildup around Venezuela any further, there will be consequences. This isn't routine diplomatic posturing. It's a warning that carries weight, urgency, and risk. Why is Venezuela suddenly back in the global spotlight, tens of thousands of miles from the front lines everyone watches? Because behind the scenes, the government in Caracas has quietly asked for help, not just from Russia, but from China and Iran. And Washington, in response, is positioning itself not merely for surveillance, but for a possible strike. Today, we're going to follow how this tangled web unfolded, who moved first, what the pieces on the chessboard are, and why one misstep could set the Caribbean on fire. Russia's message is unmistakable. Any U.S. military action near Venezuela will worsen, not solve, the situation. Moscow's spokesperson emphasized that Washington's recent deployment of vessels and aircraft in the Caribbean amounts to excessive military force. Reuters, +1. For decades, Russia has sought strategic footholds in the Western Hemisphere. Venezuela offers one. The Kremlin sees this as more than an oil deal. It is a symbol. When Russian President Vladimir Putin and Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro signed a strategic partnership earlier this year, they committed to deeper cooperation in arms and energy. The Washington Post, +1. From Moscow's perspective, allowing the United States to pressure Caracas unchallenged would weaken its global posture. So the latest diplomatic tone is colder, more deliberate. But rhetoric alone doesn't change deployment maps. Russia is leaning in, and Washington is already counting. The United States has positioned its newest flagship power up to the Caribbean Sea. The carrier strike group, anchored by the USS Gerald R. and escorted by Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, submarines, and logistic ships. Officially, the mission: interdict drug smuggling, secure regional stability. But analysts see the pattern. A floating airbase with fighters, drones, and long-range missiles, stationed within days of Venezuelan coasts. Military Times reported deployment of the carrier and multiple warships to Latin America in recent weeks. The Washington Post, +1. In Caracas, the deployment is read not as counter-narcotics, but as strategic pressure. The scale is overwhelming. Thousands of personnel, hundreds of smart missiles, and reconnaissance runs that skim the edge of sovereignty. For Venezuela, this changes the map of threat. Days away from home might now mean minutes. And that means Caracas has to respond. What's the government in Venezuela doing while all this plays out? They're reaching out. President Maduro has formally asked Russia, China, and Iran for help. Internal U.S. documents reveal letters requesting radar upgrades, drone fleets with up to 1,000-kilometer range, GPS scrambling technology, air defense batteries, and even missile units. The Washington Post. Caracas frames this as defense of sovereignty. Washington sees it as anti-access area denial buildup in its backyard. Iran has been approached reportedly for long-range drone systems, China for radar and satellite tech, Russia for fighter jet repairs and missile deliveries. Newsweek, +1. For Maduro's regime, under pressure from sanctions and domestic unrest, such military aid looks like survival. For the U.S., it looks like a line being crossed. The next phase is no longer hypothetical. It's about hardware, supply chains, and the balance tipping. But before strikes are launched, the defense architecture must be built, and it is being. Behind the headlines, real weapons are arriving. A Russian lawmaker recently claimed that advanced air defense systems, the Pantsir S-1 and Buk M2E, were delivered to Venezuela via IL-76 cargo flights. The war zone. These short to medium-range systems complement Venezuela's older S-300VM batteries, creating layered coverage of both low and high-altitude threats. Meanwhile, China and Iran are reported to be assisting with radar and drone surveillance. The Washington Post, +1. The result? A dense ring of sensors, missile launchers, and aircraft stations guarding the Orinoco Belt, Venezuela's coastal belt, and strategic oil installations. For a U.S. planner, the calculus changes. A strike once deemed easy now carries risk of detection, retaliation, or escalation. And for Caracas, the message is loud. We are not undefended. But when the weapons arrive, so do the mistakes waiting to happen. While the big ships, radars, and missiles dominate the headlines, the most dangerous moves might happen in darkness. U.S. Special Operations Aviation, units trained to fly under radar, in low visibility, at night, are reportedly deploying near the region. These units use the MH-60 Blackhawk and MH-47 Chinook with stealth modifications and advanced navigation systems for low-altitude insertion of special forces. If the U.S. plans to neutralize a radar site, extract sensitive equipment from a Venezuelan base, or conduct a targeted strike before dawn, these are the pilots who will fly the mission. In training exercises across Colombia and Puerto Rico, they've rehearsed scenarios that look eerily like preparation for something real. If something goes wrong, a helicopter hit, a team captured, a radar site destroyed, the public-facing crisis could erupt overnight. The Caribbean would shift from strategic chessboard to flashpoint, and that is exactly the moment both Moscow and Washington fear. Here is the terrifying truth. One shot, one downed drone, one misidentification can spark a war no one designed. Imagine a U.S. reconnaissance drone skimming Venezuelan airspace, mistaken for a strike platform, gets hit by a Russian-supplied missile, or a U.S. destroyer tracks a Venezuelan